Hawke's Oral History, Part 12, beginning with the transfer to Omaha. So, in Morocco, because you had base housing, for the first time you say you could have saved some money. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Remember about how much money you had in the bank when you moved to Omaha?
When we moved to Omaha,
No.
about $5,000, which was a fortune for
Yeah,
us.
real money back then.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, you show up in Omaha. What happens?
Well, there was no base housing available because we didn't want to buy a house in Nebraska, and there were very few, practically no rentals. And Dad was, because of his nuclear weapons work, he had to be within 10 minutes of the base.
Okay.
In case of an emergency. So
let me stop you. We've been saying Omaha. Actually, it's not. Where is it?
it's about 10 miles down the road from South Omaha, and it's off an Air Force base, a very old military base, where the Strategic Air Command made its headquarters.
Right.
And it was right at the edge of a little town called Bellevue, Nebraska.
Okay. So we had to be in Bellevue in order to be close enough for Dad.
Right.
Yeah, okay. And okay, so.
So we arrived with 3 little boys, 2 of them school age. Mike was going to start 5th grade, and George was starting 3rd grade. And you wouldn't get ready for kindergarten, I think, for another year. So we had to find a place for 3 little boys and a husband and wife to sleep and eat until we could find a place to live. So we found a motel down at the edge of South Omaha, a very small motel where other military couples were living temporarily until they could get housing. So we preferred having housing off base, and we couldn't have it on base, as I said, because it was frozen. They were full. So we got settled in this motel. It was a bedroom and a little sitting room when you went in the door that had a sofa that made out into a bed, and a little kitchenette where I could cook. So we moved in. School was going to be starting very quickly.
So I'm sorry. There's a bedroom, and in addition to the sofa that folds out. I don't understand.
It had a bedroom. I don't know where all you kids slept in that motel. Bedroom, and I remember it had a room outside of the bedroom that had a little kitchenette at the end, and it had a pull-out sofa that made it into a bed. But I don't. Somehow we bedded down you 3 boys in that.
And okay, go ahead.
Well, let's see. It was about a 10-mile drive from the motel to Bellevue, and we had to get you boys registered in school, the 2 older boys. So Dad got situated in his new job, 4th floor underground at SAC headquarters, and
in the underground bunker.
An underground bunker. You went down what he called the mole hole, and didn't come back up usually till evening when it was dark. So we took the 2 older boys, and of course you were always with us, but we took them to the school and got them registered at Betts School, which was in the little community. There were about 1,800 people in Bellevue. It was a very small little town, right next to the gate of the base. In fact, you could hear the planes coming in to the runway and taking off in the runway from our house that we ended up in. And lo and behold, we had to end up buying a lot in Bellevue and having a house built. So we moved in July and in the motel, and I think we were in our house by Thanksgiving in November. So the two older boys started school, and it was a very good school, very good teachers. We were so pleased with it. And then we found a good church, a Methodist church, and we got all settled in our house in November, the day, or we were there for Thanksgiving. And I remember before that, when the house was being built, Dad would come home from the base to the motel, or I would meet him out there with you boys if he had gone in with someone else to work. And we'd count boards and how many nails had been put into the house. We were so anxious to get in. And we were the second house from the corner of a little circle, Reed Drive. And the house on the corner had just been finished and being built, and had just been occupied by a military family. It ended up, there were all military families, both sides of the circle, with a bunch of kids. It was great for you kids, just great. And I was very happy in it there.
So Dad would sometimes carpool in, and sometimes he would drive in.
Yeah.
Okay. So the days he carpooled in, you had the car.
I had the car.
How did Mike and George get to school every day?
You know, it puzzles me. I drove them to school every day when I had the car, but it puzzles me about the days I might not have had the car. That's a little taste.
Maybe another mother took them in?
That's what I don't remember. The Willies, Kay and Herman Willie, were they in the motel with us? It seems like they were, and we carpooled.
Yeah, I mean the men carpooled and the mothers probably carpooled.
Yeah, right. So we got you kids into school, and we had to go and get you at lunch because they had no lunchroom. So
really?
Down the highway we went 3 times a day, take you to school, and then we go pick you up for lunch, and then take you back to school. It was a hassle.
Okay, well, so all the Betts kids went home for lunch, I guess?
Well, your school did. I think it was the only elementary school in the town.
Because I remember when I went to Betts, we took bag lunches. And
No, you didn't. You came home for lunch, or I picked you up.
Really? Why do I remember bagged lunches?
No lunches.
At Betts.
No lunchroom, nothing. Yeah, they didn't offer lunch at school.
Not even a space for you to bring a lunch and eat it.
No, you couldn't do that.
Oh, okay. But did you ever take lunches and just have the kids eat there so you didn't have to go back and forth?
You know, it's rather hazy what we did about that.
Yeah.
Very hazy. But shortly after we moved there, and school started, and your 2 brothers started school there, I went to pick Mike up. Was it at lunch or at the end of school? I think it was the end of school one day, and he wasn't there. And I think it was at lunch. And I thought, where's my son? Where's my son? And I talked to his teacher. She said, Mike got sick on the merry-go-round, that, you know what I'm talking about, on the school ground. And he got sick in his stomach and asked if he could go home. And she said, I excused him to go home. And she said, I did not realize you were living in a motel down in Omaha. And so I excused him, and lo and behold, Mike started hitchhiking down the road 10 miles to get to the...
at the age of?
At the 5th grade.
11 years old.
Yeah.
And he knew the way.
That's what shocked me. He knew he got a ride with a truck driver. But in the meantime, I'm frantic. I said, you excused him? We live 10 miles away at a motel down by South Omaha. Oh, she was horrified. She knew she had goofed. because she didn't call us or find out where he was going. She just assumed the child lived in Bellevue. And so she was just horrified at what had happened. So we didn't know where he was. So I called Dad's office and I said, honey, Mike is missing. He's left school and started down to find the motel. And I said, I don't know whether he'll find it or not. And I left that message. I didn't actually talk to Dad. That's right, I left a message with another officer. The message got to Dad. Oh, your son has been killed. He's dead. That's what Dad thought when he joined me. He said, what happened? And I said, well, Mike is missing. He said, I was just told he was dead. And I mean, poor Dad was just absolutely devastated. And I said, no, I don't know where he is. So we drove down to the motel, and here he is in bed. He had gone down to the motel, opened up the bed, and had the covers over him, was in bed. And I didn't know whether to smack him on his backside or to hug him. I was just so relieved. So was Dad. But years later, I didn't at the time, but years later, it really worried me that he said he had started down the highway and this truck driver stopped and picked him up. And I said, and you told him where to stop? And he said, yeah, I knew where to tell him to stop. And this is years later. I said, Mike, did that truck driver ever try to molest you after he picked you up? I said, I always worried you for years about that, but I never asked you, and I don't know why I didn't. He said, oh no. He said, he picked me up and he said, what are you doing? He says, I'm going to where I live at a motel. And he said, what are you doing walking like this on a highway and letting somebody pick you up? And he said, he lectured me the whole way back to the motel. And so that occurred right after we arrived. That wasn't a happy thing.
How did he get into the and now I'm with you. I'm just tagging along, obviously.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. How did he get into the hotel without a key, you know?
Probably the manager of the motel let him in.
Yeah, they knew us by then, yeah.
That's the only way I can imagine.
Okay.
But that was not a happy occurrence. And Dad got settled in his job. It was a very stressful job. That's the only time I got involved with the Wives Club. They had a bowling team. And
now, just to make clear, in the military, there's this very strong differentiation between officers and non-officers.
Well, they're supposed to be, yeah.
And then the wives all get together, especially the officers' wives, and they form kind of
clubs and
social
things.
groups.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And up to this time, you had never really participated in
No, and the NCO wives had their groups.
Wow. Did any of you think that was odd? Undemocratic, or just?
I never even thought about it. Because I wasn't interested.
Yeah.
I was raising 3 boys and liked to play the piano, and I wasn't interested in spending half a day or a day with a bunch of women. I had too much to do.
And what would they do?
They had bridge and luncheons, and they had a bowling league that they played in, and that's what Kay did. She bowled, Kay Willie.
Now, in these groups, was the wife of the senior officer kind of the head of the group?
Oh yes, there was always a rank, which I wasn't interested in. I couldn't care less whose rank was higher or lower than anybody else's. I didn't even know.
But everybody else cared.
Well, I wouldn't say everybody else, but some did, yes. Uh-huh.
But the general's wife kind of ran the wives.
Oh yeah,
Okay. So this is the first time you kind of get involved in a bowling. Okay.
In bowling, and I had bowled in college, a little bit, not much, and so I bought myself a pair of slacks, outfit, top and the pants, which I had never had before. And they had a babysitting situation where you could take your younger child and they played together in some area there by the bowling alley. And I bowled, and that was fun. We did that, I think, 2 times a week. And then the rest of the time I was busy taking the boys back and forth and grocery shopping and at the commissary and, you know, all of that stuff that goes into being a homemaker. And cooking in the motel room, in the kitchenette. And
But the bowling started while you were already in the motel room?
oh yes.
Okay, so you would drive to was it a bowling alley in the town or on the base?
No, it was at the base. And I quit doing it when we got settled in our house.
You stopped doing it? So it was just those 10 weeks you bowled?
It was just a temporary thing for me to do while we were in the motel.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't have very much to do because there's no cleaning and all that. And I like Kay so much, Kay Willie. We became such close friends.
What was the highest you ever bowled?
Oh, the highest is 300, isn't it? 250 maybe. I was a good bowler.
You bowled a 250?
I was a good bowler.
Whoa. Did you
I made lots of strikes. I made lots of strikes and what do they call the spares?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a good bowler.
Did you put spin on the ball on purpose, or you just bowled a straight ball? Do you remember?
I threw a straight ball. I wasn't clever.
Well, 250 is pretty clever.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't.
No, just your highest though you ever got.
That was probably about the highest I ever got.
Wow. So you were one of the better bowlers then, probably.
Yeah, I did real well with it.
So they didn't ask you to, when you quit, they didn't say, hey, you can't quit, you got to keep bowling.
No, nobody cared. And
so describe the house.
Well, the house got finished, and we had to choose the curtains and the everything that went into the house, and we had to buy new furniture for furniture that had broken, being shipped to Morocco and back, and we had to get a new freezer because the freezer, the big carrier freezer we had broken. So the $5,000 was really wonderful that we had, but it went fast. We had to spend it on a down payment on the house.
Do you remember what the house cost?
Yeah, it cost $16,000. It was, you walk in, and there was a living room, and then a little half wall shelf that was across the living room, and then the kitchen was behind that with another area where you could have a dining table, or you could have a sofa for a little sitting room. Then there was 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and 1 bathroom.
And the bedrooms were off to the left when you went in the door, correct?
Yeah, right. And
down the hallway.
Yeah, down a hallway. And off of the master bedroom was a half bath. I shouldn't even say half. It just had a wash basin and a commode off of our bedroom.
That was private to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that was your master half bath.
Half bath, master half bath. And it had a huge backyard, which was nice. And the Willies bought the house behind us, and next door were the Burlingames with their 4 kids. And the Willies had 4 kids, and we had 3 kids. And then the house immediately behind us was the Corgers, and they had 1 kid. And then on the other side of the street, the circle, there were kids in every house.
Right.
And they were all officers and their families.
Except for the Burlingames.
And except the Burlingames. And most of them, which was interesting, most of them had just returned from a 2 to 4 year tour overseas. The Burlingames had just returned from England. We had just returned from Africa. I don't know where the rest were from, but they almost all had overseas assignments. So the kids were pretty smart. They had been around. Anyway, we got you all settled.
The house had a basement, didn't it?
Oh yeah, oh yes, oh yeah. You know your father. He always had to have a project he was working on anyway at home. Well, this was a golden opportunity. He decided as soon as we moved in, he was finishing off the bedroom to have more room for you kids. And I, I remember the big slabs of, I forget what you call them, for ceilings. He wanted to enclose the ceiling with these big panels.
Of the basement.
In the basement. And he had Mike, who was the tallest of all of you at that time, and George, I think, help him go up the ladder and hold up this thing while he was pounding. I mean, he worked so hard. But he finished the basement. We put carpeting in, and he put a bathroom in the basement. And so we made a room for Mike and George. And put the furniture between to divide the two into two little bedrooms. And then he got portable wardrobes and put down there. Well, oh, it was funny. The 5 years we were there, you kids had gun holsters and caps that you shoot off and play cowboy and Indian and whatever. And in the wintertime, you'd play inside. And it seemed like the kids always came to our house, the whole gang. And they'd all pile in through the door from the garage, and they'd all go downstairs.
Yeah, because the door to the basement was in the kitchen.
Was in the kitchen.
The laundry room, right?
The kitchen, you came in from the garage, and just to your left was a door, and it had the stairs down into the basement. And I would open that door to check on you boys to be sure everything was okay. And there was clouds of whatever that was that went off when you used your caps on your guns. And the smell was horrible. And you
guys, it was a great smell. It was a great smell.
And you guys would be chasing each other around the basement. Dad taught you guys to target shoot down there.
Yeah, you do it. How did he do that? Do you remember?
I sure don't. But anyway,
the pellet gun. Yeah.
We lived there. When we went there, the assignment was for 2 years. When Dad got his orders, we were assigned there for 2 years. We were there 6 months, and his assignment had been extended, not voluntarily, the government did, for another year, and I'm not sure, but that may have been when they put him on the PSYOP.
The Joint Strategic Target
Yeah.
Group.
It might have been then when they did that. Although, after he finished that 3rd year, they extended our assignment 2 more years. So they didn't let Dad leave for 5 years. And he hated the place. He was the only time, well, he didn't care for Jack Butcher and Sears. But it was stress. He did not like his assignment there, and they kept extending him. And
do you remember specifically why he didn't like it? It was the stress, or
it was
it his bosses, or?
Well, I think it was. I'm not sure. He hated the weather.
Yeah.
Dad just hated the winters more than I did. And I was putting up with it with you boys, getting you dressed and taking it off and putting it back on. He hated the weather. He hated winter. He was going down that mole hole at 6:30 and 7 in the morning in the dark in the winter. And when he'd come out at night to come home, it was dark. He never saw the sunshine. That was very depressing. There was always a tension in the underground because he was in operations, and if anyone hiccuped in the world, there was tension, and there were so many generals there.
Was it the first time he'd been in a job where he was kind of bumping up against the politics?
Oh yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad you brought that up.
Politics of the military.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. was always coming down and telling the military what to do. Robert McNamara drove Dad crazy. He was the
Secretary
of Defense? And all of that bunch under the Kennedy administration. Then the Cuban crisis came up during that time.
We'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah.
Mom and Dad came and visited us just at the time the Cuban crisis broke out. We were near enough that we started taking you boys camping up in Minnesota, so Dad enjoyed that. I remember he built a camper.
Okay, let's back up. So, Dad was stressed out for lots of reasons: the weather, the hours,
yeah,
the stress of the job, just the job itself, and then added to that was sort of the politics.
Oh, the politics drove him crazy.
Now experiencing for the first time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he had to fight to get his flying time in because he didn't have time, and you had to have so many hours. A pilot had to have so many flying time hours in order to get his flight pay every month.
Right. So you're stressed out about that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Cuba. This would be 1962. This would be October 1962. How did that go? What was the family like?
Well, Dad had started spending more and more hours in the underground during that crisis because it was such a hypertensive situation. And Mom and Dad just happened to arrive on the train for a visit with us at the beginning of the crisis. So we had to, in order for Dad to have any time with his parents, we had to plan to go over to the Officers Club and have dinner, and he'd join us, and then he'd go back to the underground and we'd go home. He'd get calls in the middle of the night if he was home. Come back to the base. This is, you have to get back here.
Would he ever spend the night in the underground?
I don't remember a whole night, no.
Okay. Would he come home late?
Oh yeah, and tired, exhausted, worried, but he never talked about it. Dad had a way that it was wonderful because that's what he needed to, was not to talk about it. But he never talked about his work to me.
So you didn't know anything any more about it than what you were seeing on the news?
Exactly.
But you knew it was related?
Oh yeah, oh yes, oh yeah. But I didn't know how deeply involved he was in operations. I didn't know that. I was the most stupid Air Force wife you ever saw. And it was good. As he told me years later, he said, I kept you that way because that was the best way to keep you and the boys safe. You had nothing to tell anybody if you were ever taken hostage. And you were protecting all the troops when you didn't talk about it. He was a very good officer about that.
Do you recall if anybody sent their families off the base at that time?
Well, yes, I never knew personally any that left, but they told the people, we are in a very vulnerable spot if Russia decides to take off on us during this. And if you want to take your family and take them home or put them somewhere else, you better do it.
Really?
If you want to, because we are very vulnerable. So Dad and I think we only knew maybe a couple of families that chose to do that. Dad wasn't worried about that.
But you discussed
We
it?
talked about the fact that people were leaving, and but not many did. Nobody on our street did.
Interesting. And how long did that last?
I don't recall exactly.
Were you more attentive to the news at that time than usual?
No, not necessarily. I'm ashamed to admit these things because it seems like I was pretty stupid, but I stayed very busy with you boys and keeping the house and cooking and shopping and that sort of thing.
Now, Dad, there was a point in time when Dad was diagnosed with diabetes, and he was taken off of flight status. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, that was during our stay in Omaha. Dad got overweight. He was over 200 pounds. And he never looked as heavy as he really was. That was kind of nice. But he had gotten pretty heavy. And I forget how they died, how it happened that they diagnosed him with it. But for some reason they had found out through an annual physical or something that his blood sugar was high. And they did all sorts of tests with him and made the decision that he was diabetic, borderline they called it. And he couldn't fly when you're diabetic. You're not allowed to fly. So they grounded him. And that's one of the very few times in our 74 years of marriage I ever saw him really discouraged. He'd come home and he'd just lie down on the bed sometimes. He worried. He didn't want to be grounded. It wasn't good for him to be grounded, and it took some of the pay from us every month for him to be grounded. And he really was concerned. Well, he went on a diabetic diet, and he lost 40-some pounds, and went down to about 160 pounds. And to the point where we thought we were going to have to buy all new uniforms for him, but we had them taken in, and it was okay. So he went on this diabetic diet and lost the weight, and they reinstated him after about I think it only took him about a month and a half. I don't remember exactly how long, and they reinstated his flying status. And so,
was that before or after Cuba? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember.
Okay. So during that time when he lost 40 pounds in a month and a half, do you remember cooking for him, what you were doing?
No, but he was very careful to follow the diet, which was unusual for your father. He loved the wrong things, fats and carbohydrates and sweets. Dad has never liked foods that were good for him.
But do you remember cooking differently at that time?
Not particularly. He just avoided some of the things that I cooked, and we were careful.
At that time, was he drinking, as I recall, some sort of special like Metrocal drink or something like that? Was that?
Yeah, we used that. When did we do that?
Well, Metrocal, as I remember.
Metrocal and another drink. There were two different powder drinks. I don't remember what part of our lives we did that.
Okay. Other than the bowling, were you involved with the wives' clubs?
No, not at all.
That was just the only time.
Not at all.
Okay. Talk about the winters.
Oh, they were cold and they were messy. Omaha didn't have pretty winters. It was snowing. We get inch after inch of snow, and then maybe the next week it'd go up to 40 degrees and start to melt and get all yucky. It was not a pleasant winter in Omaha.
And then
the first Christmas we were there, you got a dog. You kids got a dog, and Susie liked to play out in the snow with you kids. I have pictures of her.
And we always walked to school.
You always walked or rode a bicycle to school. Yeah.
So talk about camping. So what was the routine?
Well, Dad saw these plans advertised for a trailer, a camping trailer, and so he wanted a project. So he sent for the plans and built the trailer in our garage, and it was a neat little trailer. Had beds for all 5 of us. And so he got it done for summer, and we decided we'd go up to Sibley Lake Sibley. That was in Minnesota.
Sibley State Park.
What?
Sibley State Park.
In Minnesota. We went there, it seems to me, 2 times, and then we went to Itasca.
Lake Itasca.
That's up near.
It's the headwaters of the Mississippi.
Well, the headwaters, yeah, I knew that, but I was trying to think geographically. Anyway, you were at the headwaters of the Mississippi, and Dad thought that was great for you kids to climb across that. And then he wanted you boys to go, and he wanted to too, see a Major League Ball game. So he made plans to go into the Twin Cities to see the Minnesota Twins play. And he chose the second day that they were playing this team. I don't remember what team they were playing.
Kansas City, I think.
What?
I think it was Kansas City.
Was it? And lo and behold, the day before you guys went in, they pitched a no-hitter. Oh, he was so disgusted that she didn't go in to see it. Now, I had a sorority sister in college that was from, that lived in Minnesota, in the Edina, Minnesota, which is right near the Twin Cities. So we went in and visited them one day. Peggy was a piano major also at the university, and we were real good friends. And then she and her husband and the kids came down and spent a Thanksgiving with us one year.
How many summers did we go camp in Minnesota?
Well, at least 3, I think.
Because one summer it was in tents.
At least 3.
One summer we were camping in tents.
Yeah.
That was probably the first summer.
That was the summer that Mom and Dad went with us.
Right. We didn't have a trailer. We were in 2 different tents.
Yeah. And Mom and Dad were there, and we took them up camping. That was so funny. We called Grandma the Gypsy Queen. She had to have her hot bath every night. Period. Even if she's camping. So I remember Dad would put on the hot water over this fire outside, put the water on to get it hot for Mom's bath, and then she'd go in and take a bath. We called her the Gypsy Queen. And then one summer we stayed the night, where was it? Where the mosquitoes were so horrible.
No, I can't remember. But it was like a month each time, right? We camped for about a month each time, right?
It seemed like it was that long, but it really wasn't, I don't think.
Yeah.
Dad wouldn't get that much time each time.
At least it was a couple of weeks.
Yeah. I remember one night we were out camping. I think it was when Mom and Dad were with us. And Dad had put a shelter over the top between 2 tents, I guess it was. No.
Yeah, you were in one tent, and the boys and the boys in the other tent. Yeah.
And he set up the stove and everything underneath that shelter between them, and it poured rain. I mean, it poured rain, and I'm standing there trying to fry. I remember I was frying chicken, and I was trying to fry chicken, and the rain was just coming down, and it was muddy where I was standing. I thought, this is fun.
But Dad would take the boys out fishing.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You just stay in camp and just read or whatever.
Yeah. He'd take you 3 boys, and George just didn't enjoy it at all. I don't know whether you did or not, but George would always check out books at the library and take them with him. And he'd sit in the corner of the boat with his fishing rod in the water, reading a book, and then he would be the only one that would get a bite. And it would make Mike so mad he wanted to just kill him. Yeah, it was interesting.
So they kept extending Dad's stay. what were supposed to be 2 years, then extended to 3 years, then to 5 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Anything else about Omaha that was? Oh, the officers club. What? Did you have a social life? Oh, do you have a social life?
Oh yeah. They had a big officers club there because it was a big headquarters, and we'd have dinner with couples, and then we did not entertain a lot. We were not big drinkers, and but one night we decided one weekend it was necessary to pay back some social obligations, so we had not a big one. It was only maybe 4 or 5 couples over in the evening, and it was either New Year's. It was something where we all wore formals. And then I had an interesting social experience when we were there. I had never been to a, what did they call them in the military? Where it was, the men all wore their most dressy military uniforms, and the general was always there.
Military ball or?
No, it was a formal dinner. Formal dinner. But some general's night out or something like that, and it was a command performance. You had to come, whether you wanted to or not. So Dad dressed up in his dress uniform. I had a formal dress, and we had some couples over beforehand, and we invited Pat and Chuck over also that night. Even though they weren't going to the event, we would go and have dinner at the officers club, or if once in a while Dad would say, well, on Friday meet me at the club at the end of the day, and we'll have dinner with some of the officers, and sometimes we do that. I remember shortly after we arrived and we got settled in our house, the colonel who was head of the particular office that Dad worked in operations, Colonel Snodgrass, Hawke Snodgrass, his wife, they lived in Omaha, and how he got away with that, I don't know. Anyway, she had a coffee at her home at the beginning of the first year we were there for the new wives that had arrived, to introduce the new ones to the wives in the office. Now this is just an office group where Dad was, and Hawke was Dad's boss. I refused the invitation because it was the beginning of winter, or right, we had already gotten into winter. It was a long way in Omaha, and so I said, I'm sorry, but I regret that I can't come. And I was very much criticized by her. She said on the phone to me, well, it's very important that you come and meet everybody. And I said, I understand that, Mrs. Snodgrass, but I have 3 sons. They're all very young, and there's no lunchroom at the school, and I have to go pick them up for lunch. Well, can't you get someone to come and take care of them, or give them to a neighbor to have their lunch? I said, you know, Mrs. Snodgrass, I would not ask that of any friend or neighbor because it's not an emergency. I said, if it were an emergency, I'd be happy to do that, but just for something social, I don't think I could do that. And so she said, well, I just am sorry you're not coming. It would be very important for you to be here. I said, well, thank you very much. Maybe I can meet you all later. So I didn't go. And it was shortly after that that Dad said, meet me at the club Friday night. And he said, there were some promotions that had taken place, and they always met at the club to celebrate the promotions. And he said, then you'll get to meet some of the people in my office. So I went, and I was introduced to Colonel Snodgrass. And I said, well, it's so nice to meet you, Colonel. I said, I've talked with your wife on the phone. And I said, I'm really sorry I couldn't accept the invitation to the wives' coffee that she had. But I said, you know, Colonel, we have 3 small sons, and no way to have them eat their lunch except to come home. He said, Mrs. Hawke, you made the right choice. Keep going at it. He said, that was good. He said, your family comes first.
Oh, good for him.
I was so tickled. And that's the night that I was told that your father's too honest. Colonel Snodgrass, when he first met me that night, said, you must be very proud of your husband. He's a wonderful officer, and I'm so happy to have him. And I said, well, thank you, sir. He said, but he only has one problem. And I thought, oops, what am I going to be told now? He said, he's too damned honest. I said, sir? He said, he's too damned honest. Use that wording. I'll never forget it. And I said, well, good. I said, I'm glad. I said, I know he is, but I'm glad you see it. And he just smiled. That's all he said.
Well, that's the window into the stress.
What?
That's the window into the stress we were just talking about.
Yeah.
You know, Dad's gotten to a level where all of a sudden games are being played.
Yeah.
And he's not a game player.
No, he never was.
Yeah.
If it wasn't correct and he was in charge, then he told him, no, there aren't that many nukes at this such and such station, or the planes aren't the right planes for what you have there. He told them the truth. And when they didn't,
that might make somebody else look bad.
Yeah. No matter what it made anybody look like, he told them the truth. He was responsible for those nukes. But I thought that was so funny. He's too damn honest. And I said, well, I hope he stays that way.
Did any famous people come through the base that you met?
John F. Kennedy, when he was campaigning for president, came through with his entourage. And we were at the Officers Club for dinner the night that he was there. And of course, they had closed off part of the dining room for his dinner with the generals. And he was having dinner with all the generals there. But the word got rumored around and whispered around our side of the barrier, John F. Kennedy's next door, and will be coming out soon to leave. So we all lined up, and he shook our hands as he left. We came home. And said to you boys, we shook John Kennedy's hand tonight. And they said, go wash your hands.
I didn't say that. I wouldn't have said that.
The older boys did.
Yeah. Was he handsome?
Oh, very handsome.
Yeah.
Good-looking man.
Yeah.
I thought.
Right. Was he tall, do you remember?
No, he didn't seem tall to me. I don't know how tall he is. He was. But I was glad to meet him. He was a good-looking man.
And was Jackie with him?
No.
By himself?
No, it was an all-male entourage.
Now, were there any entertainers that came through Omaha and entertained?
No. Not that I knew of. Not that I was aware
of. I think. Well, what did the boys do?
Oh boy, you guys were involved in Little League, including yourself. You had Pee Wee League. The officer down in the corner, Larry Brown, was your coach. Mike and George were in Little League. And then when they got older during that 5 years, let's see, when we left, Mike was in his sophomore year of high school, and George was a freshman, 9th grade. And they played basketball on the base in the basketball league and did real well. They had a good coach. You were busy all the time. There was always something for you to do. We had a library, a small library. You boys went to the library regularly. And then there was a Matthews bookstore in Omaha that I found. And so once a month we had a trip down to Matthews bookstore so that you boys were each allowed to buy a book down there. And they had the children's section up into a balcony in the store. And Mary O'Leary was the older lady who always waited on us. And I got to love her. I corresponded with her till she died after we left. She just loved you boys. She thought you were such nice boys. And a new employee had come on one of my trips in there. And she was real disturbed when she saw you three boys go upstairs while I was down in the adult book section. And I heard Mary O'Leary quietly say to her, "Oh, those are the Hawke boys. They're safe. The books are safe up there with them. They won't hurt the books." But they normally didn't let kids up there without their parents.
I think you took me to an eye doctor once, and I was looking out the window.
Oh yeah, you and George needed regular checkups on your eyes, and it was on, I think, around the 3rd or 4th floor in this tall building in Omaha where the doctor's office was. And it had a great big window looking out over the city where we had to sit to wait for our appointments. And you were not in kindergarten yet. And you went over to the window and you turned around and you said, "Mommy, look, the Eiffel Tower." And there was a building that you were looking at that was similar, tall and similar to the Eiffel Tower.
And we hadn't been to Paris not long before that.
Yeah, we had been to Paris.
And not long before that, really.
No, it wasn't very long before that. So you remembered that you saw a building that looked like that. You called it the Eiffel Tower. The people looked at me. "How does he know that looks like the Eiffel Tower?" I said, "Well, we just came back from overseas and the children saw it." But I thought that was funny. And you always loved going down for those checkups because you had found the Bavarian mints when we were overseas. Those little Bavarian mint candies. Oh, they were so good. And there was a pharmacy downstairs, and we found them there, and you guys just loved getting your Bavarian mints. A lot of different little things.
And you joined the church?
Oh, it was we really loved my church there. St. James Methodist Church in the little town of Bellevue. And they were meeting when we first got there in a school, and they needed a piano player shortly after we started going there. And so I oddly enough, I volunteered. Usually I didn't, but they really desperately needed someone to play the hymns. So I said, "Well, I'll be glad to play them." Well, he wasn't. Clarence McConkie was his name. Reverend McConkie. He was a young man and so nice. And he wasn't going to take my volunteerism seriously because he didn't want somebody who just thought they could play him and then be stuck with him. So, and that was okay. So he said, "Well, may I come out and visit you and you can play some hymns for me?" And I said, "Sure." So he came and he said, "You got the job."
He came to our house?
Yeah, he came to our house and I played some hymns for him and we visited. And he said, "You got the job."
You got the job volunteering?
Yeah. And so I played, and then they moved into their church that they were building, and they had a little electric organ. And I never took organ lessons in my life. I couldn't afford them. And so they needed an organist, and they wanted me to play the organ for the church. So I said, "Okay." Well, I didn't know anything about the foot pedals and how to the different stops on the organ. But I, like an idiot, I said, sure, I'll try. And then they got a music director who had formed a choir, and I ended up going to choir practice one night a week and playing for the church service. And then Dad bought me a little Hamilton home organ, 2-manual organ.
A 2-manual organ?
No, it was a 1-manual. No, we didn't.
Meaning it
was just one.
One layer.
But with the different pull stops.
Right.
And so we had that organ until we moved over to Limberlost. I had fun on that. It had foot pedals. Foot pedals weren't that difficult to get by with. It was I didn't play them professionally, and I didn't do fancy things with it. But if I just played the root tone of each measure with my foot pedals, it was fun. It was easy. I got along well with the young man they hired for the choir director.
Now, was Dad gone a lot at this time? Was he traveling a lot, or did he stay around home most of the time during this time?
He was past the 4-month TDYs. No more of those, because he was not with the combat crews, the ready crews. Mostly his travel was between Omaha and the Pentagon. He went there real often, but it would only be for 3 days. And then the other place he flew a lot was Vandenberg, out in California. He flew to Vandenberg real often. And those were the two most, as I remember, most prominent places where he flew. And he'd be gone for 3 days.
Now, he got a promotion when he was there, right?
Yeah, he became lieutenant colonel.
Right. Was that kind of fun?
Oh yeah, we were real delighted about that.
What happens around that?
Oh, they have promotion parties.
Uh-huh.
So he was part of a promotion party at the club. And that was it. Yeah. So that was his big promotion that he really was happy to have, was when we were still in Tucson and going TDY to Maxwell Air Force Base for schools. And he told you about all those. So while we were down at Maxwell, and he was attending a school, and I had you and the children there. No, I think we only had Mike and George then. Yeah. In fact, I'm sure it was when we were renting Turner Place, and he was at a 6-week school.
In Maxwell? Wasn't Maxwell?
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell's.
It's in Montgomery, Alabama.
Oh, Montgomery. Okay, Montgomery. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And George was about 2, I guess, or I was pregnant with Kathy. And when we went there for that 6 weeks, he was at school. They always went on Saturday morning till noon, and a telegram arrived at our house, and it was from, I think, Jose. Can't think of his last name. Jose Diaz, Major Diaz, that Dad worked with here at the nuclear center out of the base. And he was congratulating Dad on making his majority. Dad was captain then. And so when Dad got home, I said, well, congratulations, Major Hawke. He said, what? I said, you've made major. And Jose has sent you a telegram. Well, he hadn't received the news yet. Dad hadn't.
Well, that was cool.
What?
That was cool. You got to tell him?
Yeah, it was really cool. And what was so nice about it, leave it to Dad, old practical, your father. He said, oh, great. He said, I was only a captain for a year and a half. And he said, that's the best promotion you can get, because you go from company grade officer to field grade officer. And the promotion is the you get the biggest hike in pay
That's the biggest, that's a big promotion, yeah.
when you go traditionally. And he said, "Oh, that's great." And the same day, only a while later, we got a telegram from George and Mildred. We got a telegram from Mom and Dad, all congratulating him. Now, I don't know how they knew it.
Probably in the paper.
It probably was, because they always put those things in the paper. But that was a real pleasant time when he made major.
Now Mike is sophomore in high school, so he's gone through puberty.
He what?
He's gone through puberty. Mike's a sophomore in high school. Is he starting to date? Is he starting to...
Well, he started to date actually in Omaha.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we were in Bellevue, he started to date.
He asked one girl in our circle to go to the movies. So, of course, Dad drove them and he picked him up because he wasn't driving age yet. And he was really interested in girls at that time. Yeah.
Now, is he starting to rebel or anything like that? You know, because we're getting into the family time where the kids are growing up now.
Well, Mike never rebelled against his dad ever. It was yes sir, no sir. Yes sir, I'll do it. No sir. Mike did not get along with me during those years. He did not want a woman to tell him what to do. I don't know why. And he today tells me, "Mom, I don't know why I was that way." He did not like me telling him that he needed to do something. And he was not a pleasant boy to me.
But what makes he didn't want his mom telling him?
Yeah.
You're kind of expanding that to...
Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, he had women teachers, right?
Oh, he got along with the teachers.
Yeah. So it was his mother.
It was his mother.
Yeah.
He rebelled against me. But I would ask him to do something, he'd be so grumpy and nasty and didn't want to do it. And one time I thought he was going to double up his fist and smack me about something. I don't remember what it was, but he didn't. But he was very rebellious to me during those years, and but never his father. Never. I don't. Mike told me one time. He said, "I don't know why I was that way." Even into college, I can remember one time he and Lori were sitting in the living room at Indian Ridge, and Dad was putting up the Christmas tree lights outside. And I said, "Honey, I think it'd be good if you go out there and help Dad. He needs help putting those lights up." He wouldn't do it. He just said nope. Sat there with Lori and wouldn't go out and do it.
I don't think that's uncommon.
No, it isn't.
Yes.
That was his way of rebelling.
Yeah.
And he rebelled with his schoolwork. He wasn't interested in school. And he flunked out of college.
Oh, we'll get to that.
But that's later.
Yeah. But he's starting to get interested in girls and go through all this.
Oh, yeah.
And, now, you and Dad used to have this habit that he'd come home, and how did that happen? Your little routines. When you'd come home from work, what would happen?
Yeah, I remember that mostly when we lived in Indian Ridge.
But that didn't start in Omaha?
I don't remember it then, but it may have, and I just don't remember it happening then. But Dad would come home, and he was a civilian at heart, I think. I don't know. But he'd come in the house and go straight to the bedroom, and I'd follow him in the bedroom.
No, what you mean is he wasn't Joe military.
Well, I don't know what that means, but...
Well, he just wasn't really into the military life.
No, he never stopped at the officers' club after work to have a beer with him before he went home. He never did that. He came straight home from his office. He came straight into the bedroom and took his uniform off, hung it up, put on his civilian clothes every single night. And we'd have our big hug and kiss and well, how did things go today? Fine. And of course, I would always threaten you boys. If you were really nasty and ugly that day, I'd say, "Just wait till your dad comes home." And of course, you told me you all would be shaking outside the bedroom door. "What's she doing? Is she telling him, Dad? Is she telling on us?" not 90% of the time, I never said anything to him about you. And so we'd have our little 10 minutes, 15 minutes where he changed his uniform, and then we'd both come out of the bedroom and he'd communicate and get, start being daddy. Yeah.
As I recall, there was a time when you took us to get shots, vaccinations on the base.
Well, that was when we were getting ready to go to Africa.
No. This was this was in Omaha. We were getting some sort of shot, and George decided.
That's when the polio vaccine was being given. That when it was new.
That was a shot?
No, it wasn't a shot. It was a liquid.
No, but we were getting a shot.
No, George thought we were going to have a shot.
Oh, he thought we were going to have a shot.
He thought it was a shot. He was still real young.
Yeah.
He was in 4th grade, 5th grade. He thought he was going to have a shot, and he just hated shots in those days. Hated them, scared to death of them. And so they had the clinic. Why it was there, I don't know. It wasn't at the hospital, but they set up a clinic where they gave the polio in a little cup to each one. At the end of Generals, what we call Generals Row, where all the generals lived, and their garages behind the houses. And I had you 3 boys in line. There was a long line waiting to get your polio juice. And lo and behold, I can't hold 3 boys' hands. And lo and behold, he somehow got loose and took off. I mean, he took off like a rabbit.
You saw him run?
Yeah, he just took off. And I thought, oh my gosh. So, somehow you boys, we must have been close to getting them because you boys got yours that day. And I grabbed you 2 boys and we went up and down the garages behind General's Road to see if he'd hidden in any of the garages. Couldn't find him. Couldn't find George anywhere. So I have to call Dad at his office. It's near the end of the day. So he said, I'll be right there. So he came over. We had 2 cars in. And and he came over and he said, let's go hunt for George. We found him, one lone little boy sitting in the big baseball stadium on the base, just sitting there.
In the bleachers.
Hoping nobody would see him or find him. He was so cute. He was a funny boy. And so he was not going to get that polio. No way. Boy, he took off like a rabbit.
Now, all our activities were basically on the base, Little League,
They were.
stuff like that. So
They were.
we'd be going back and forth to the base.
Yeah.
And we were really next to the runway.
Oh yeah, you could hear the planes land and take off. One night when we got home from dinner at the Officers Club, Dad got a call from a personal friend on the base. And he said, my dad's just had a heart attack and I need to get to Waco, Texas. Can you check out our plane and fly me there? Dad was checked out in the single-engine jet at that time. What was the name of it? The
F-80, T-38.
Was it? So Dad said, I think I can. He said, give me a few minutes and I'll call you back. So Dad called and whoever you have to call to get a plane to fly, and asked if he could check out a jet or whatever the name of the plane was, if he could check one out that night to fly this man down to Waco. The man was not a pilot, obviously. And so Dad went over to the flight line and put his flight suit on and went over to the flight line and filed his flight plan, and he flew the guy down to Waco, let him off, filed his flight plan for return, and I was so nervous about it that night. I remember I kept listening for planes to come in. And I guess it was about 4 in the morning he landed, which was good because about an hour after he landed, they closed the runway to paint it, to paint the strips. And so he got in in time. But yes, we were close to the flight line.
Now, when we were there, President Kennedy was assassinated.
No,
Yes, he was.
he was assassinated when we were in Tucson.
You're right. You're absolutely correct about that. We'll get to that later. We'll get to that later. Well, what was the other question I was going to ask you? There was a time when we didn't always go to Minnesota. Actually, we went to Tucson one time when we were in Omaha.
Dad belonged to the Aero Club on the base, and they had little single-engine Cessnas or whatever. We called it the Little Bluebird. It was a Navion single-engine plane, and
how many people did it hold?
Well, it had the 5 of us.
Held 5 people.
Yeah, and we had 2 weeks leave, and we were flying home to celebrate Mom's birthday, your grandmother's birthday, April 14th. And we took off, and Dad was flying the 5 of us in this little single-engine Navion to Tucson and back. It was over Easter. We got as far as Hobbs, New Mexico, and we landed there for gas. We refueled. The 5 of us got in the plane. He took off, and he didn't any more than get up into the air when he saw the gas gauge going down like this. And when they refueled us, they didn't put the gas cap on well enough, and it had come off in takeoff, and we were losing all the gas. So he landed, and he said, "You goofed us up. You didn't get that gas cap on properly." "Oh, well, we'll take care of it." So they added gas to our plane. It's late in the afternoon, and we get practically airborne again, and it's coming out on the wing again, gas, and the gauge is going down. He turned around and came back down and landed, and he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "There's something wrong with that cap you're putting on." Well, it was a cap that had, I forget what kind of cap it was, but it leaked gas out. It wasn't the right cap. So he said, "I'm staying here all night. I'm not taking this plane off the ground again." So we got rooms in a motel and stayed all night and took off the next day, and it was fine. Well, we flew to El Paso and landed for fuel, and we were going to take off and fly to Tucson. Well, the winds had come up and the weather didn't look good, and someone came into base ops or on the flight line while they were refueling us, and Dad was checking with him how the weather was, because they were coming in from Tucson. "How was your weather coming in from Tucson?" And they said, "Well, there's quite a bit of turbulence, a lot of high winds." And Dad said, "What do you think?" And the guy said, "Oh, you can make it." And Dad checked with the weather report that they gave the pilots, and it looked like we could make it. So we took off, and we got as far as, what was the name of that place? Anyway, Dad said to me, "Look ahead of us." and we're flying in the air, and we're looking ahead, and I'm not very happy. Then you boys are just happy little pumpkins sitting in the back of us, and here's this wall, and it was dust, a severe dust storm, from top to bottom. You couldn't. It was down to the ground. So Dad says, "I'm not going any further." And he called ahead. What was the name of it? It was Columbus, I think. Columbus was the name of the place. And sure enough, he got a report back when he checked with the weather that there was high winds and dust ahead of us. So Dad says, "I'm flying back to El Paso." Turned the airplane around, and we went back to El Paso and landed and spent the night there. And
these are all Air Force facilities.
Oh yeah. So we spent the night there and flew into Tucson the next day. And I thought to myself, yeah, we're saving time.
Yeah,
took us 3 days to get here.
Could have driven faster.
Yeah, we could have driven faster. And but anyway, that's what happened. Then at the end of the time in Tucson on that trip, I was really scared. Oh, such a pansy. We got all packed. Mom and Dad took us out to the base and got the airplane all ready to leave. Got the baggage all packed in the airplane, including the lemons that you were taking back to show your kindergarten teacher.
That were how big?
They were like a grapefruit.
Sure. How big were they?
Oh, like it.
Yeah.
Like that. They were Meyer lemons. Wonderful lemons. Dad's tree.
Yeah.
Dad had a tree in the backyard. And so they get us out to the airplane, right there at the airplane, at the door of the plane. Dad has us all packed, and we're ready to get in the plane. And I go around the back of the plane and throw up. Good Air Force wife. I threw up. I was so scared. And Dad says, "Honey, what's the matter?" I said, "I'm scared." He said, "I'm not taking you back in this airplane. I'm sorry." He said, "Mom and Dad, will you take Frank and Mom back, Avonelle, back to the house? I'm going to fly the 2 boys home so they can get back in school."
Yeah. Was Frank throwing up?
No, Frank was fine, but he was going to stay with Mom. But he wanted to get the 2 boys back to get in school, and because they were both on Easter vacation. And so I went back home with Mom and Dad, and so did you. And we went home on a train in a Pullman in our little room on the train. And Pat Burlingame thought I was the most stupid woman on this God's green earth. She said, "Boy, if I had a husband who was a pilot and could fly me somewhere, I'd be on a plane all the time." And she said, "And you take the train."
And they met us at the train station in Omaha.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I remember seeing my first automatic door. Yeah, because Mike and George had seen it coming in. And so they said, "Hey, Frank, go walk up to that door."
I didn't know that.
I got close to it and it opened automatically, and I was blown away. It was
I didn't know that. Where was that? At the train station?
Train station in Omaha.
Is that right?
Yeah. First time I ever saw an automatic door.
I didn't know that.
Speaking of that kind of thing, we didn't have do we have television in Morocco?
Not in Morocco, no.
Television, right.
All we have is a record player and a radio.
And do we have a telephone in our home in Morocco?
It seems like we did. Yes.
I imagine he would have to have one.
Oh yes, yes, we did. Because when Hosta kept drinking while she was working for us that day, and I could tell she was getting alcohol someplace and was drinking, I called Dad at his office. And he came home and fired her.
Was this the woman who stole your watch?
What?
Was this the woman who stole your watch?
No. This was Steffi and Don's Fatima. They asked us to give work to when they left. No, the woman that stole my watch was the Fatima that we got to help us after I had pneumonia.
Okay, well, so there's a second one, Hasna. What about her?
Hosta was Steffi and Don's Fatima.
And then you took her on as a favor.
Yeah, right. And she got loaded. She was weaving down my hallway with the clothes that she was ironing, and she was she was not like the ordinary Arab woman. She was a big, heavy-set woman. And I thought, what if she takes a swing at me about something if she's loaded like that? So
had she just had found your scotch or something, or
what?
she had found your liquor cabinet?
You know, Dad had some scotch and some bourbon in a cabinet under the sink. And she found it and was drinking it while she was working.
So Dad came home, and what happened?
Well, he confronted her. I can remember he said, Hassa, you've been drinking. No, monsieur. No. You've been drinking, Hassa. And he said, I know you have. And he looked at the bottles, and the level had dropped quite a bit in both bottles.
So he fired her on the spot?
Oh, yeah. He said, get your things together, get the bus, and go back to your home. He said, you can't work here.
Now, did you tell the Duanes this later?
Oh, yeah.
What did they say? Had she done this at their place?
Well, it solved some of their problem with Don and his drinking.
What do you mean?
Well, they thought Don was drinking it all. Your husband was drinking some of it.
So we got our first television in Omaha.
No. We had television in Tucson before that.
Before we went to Morocco?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We got our first television the week or two after Kathy died in '52.
Okay.
Because we weren't able to sleep, and we'd end up in the living room on the couch, half asleep and drowsy. We couldn't go to bed. We couldn't get over what had happened. And Dad said, I'm getting a TV. Well, there was no TV station in Tucson at that time. You had to get your reception from Phoenix. So he put a great big tower on our house. And we would get reception, but it would be snow. It wasn't any good. But we'd stay up until, in those days they played the Star Spangled Banner at midnight, and the station shut down. So we'd stay in the living room until they shut down the station, and then we'd try to go to bed. That was our first TV.
But then not in Morocco, but then you got a TV when you got back to Omaha.
Right.
Okay.
We'd watch Imogene Coca and Sid Caesar in those days.
Okay. Well, this has been a long session. It's also taking place on your 75th wedding anniversary.
Yes, and Dad's been gone a year today.
Dad's been gone a year today, and you're holding up great. I know it's a tough time.
Well, there's nothing else you can do but hold up, because that's the way life is.
Yeah, but you're amazing.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. Love you.
I love you more, honey. Okay.